Christine. Okay. Hi, everybody, and welcome to The Machine is the Message, Writing and Reading in the Age of AI. My name is Molly Heinz, and I'm the chair of the MA program in Design Research, Writing, and Criticism. Yes, thank you. Your host program this evening. Thank you so much for joining us on the live stream, to our live streamers, and thanks to those who are right here with us at the Graduate Center at the School of Visual Arts. This space is the heart of our graduate community at SVA, and many of our MA, MFA, MPS programs are right here in this building or across the street. I'd like to say a special thank you to this evening's co-sponsor programs, MFA Design for Social Innovation, chaired by Mia Osaki over here. Hi, Mia. Thank you and your team. And MFA Interaction Design, chaired by Adriana Young and her team. And our very own MA in Design Research, Writing, and Criticism program is directly upstairs on the second floor. And we invite you upstairs to our studio via elevator or stairs for a reception after the conversation, where you can meet the speakers and make a few new friends, perhaps over more drinks. And P.S., if you missed it, there's a bar just outside over here. You can grab a drink. But we'll have more after tonight's conversation just upstairs right above us. And if you're not familiar with design research, writing, and criticism, or DCRIT as we like to call it, just a few notes. We're an intensive one-year master's that considers design's context and its consequences. And we do that with a curriculum that combines humanities critical thinking with journalistic skills and applies that to design topics. Our primary medium is the written word for reading, but we also write for the ear by producing podcasts, and we have a lot of practice in public speaking, as our current students know all too well. And in addition to our intensive full-time track, we have a newly launched part-time option, which is 2 academic years, 4 semesters. And tonight, I'm really excited to announce, for the first time, just approved today, a new full tuition scholarship in addition to our long-running existing scholarship program. Yes, that deserves applause, yes. And because SVA agrees, and we think so too. We need critical thinking and critical voices more than ever right now. If you'd like to learn more, please talk to me later or try to come to one of our upcoming virtual information sessions, which we have online at usually around lunchtime. We have one tomorrow at noon, and you can RSVP with a QR code that you'll see on flyers around here in the lobby or upstairs in our studio that say lunch hour. Thank you for those to our superstar alum Yikang Lee over here. Thank you, Yikang. Class of 2025 for helping us with our communications all through this fall. And thank you to our current students, MA students, July Winters, who's leading the charge on our socials, and Vlad Ilkevich on tech. Thank you, Vlad, just to my left. You can also pick up a copy of our department publication, second floor, as you pass through the hallway or upstairs in the studio. So now I'm going to pass the mic to Eric Schwartau, our faculty member and director of operations, who will introduce this evening's panel. Eric.
Thank you, Molly. Welcome, everyone. I was going to say thank you to July and Vlad and Yikang, of course. I have to go over here because I need to click through. I'll be off screen of the live stream. That's all right. They can hear me. So I want to start with some headlines. Why even try if you have AI? Why can't AI manage my emails? AI is coming for culture. AI is homogenizing our thoughts. Are we taking AI seriously enough? That's from the New Yorker. From the Atlantic, I'm a high schooler. AI is demolishing my education. My students use AI, so what? From the Wall Street Journal, the most joyless tech revolution ever. AI is a tool, not a soul. From the New York Times, what if AI is actually good for Hollywood? AI video is threatening our ability to trust documentaries. Everyone is using AI for everything. Is that bad? why people can't quit ChatGPT, and last but not least, 48 hours without AI. And that is just the tip of the A iceberg. Yes, I said that. In these op-eds, AI is a foil, friend, assistant, therapist, joy killer, ghostwriter, oppressor, hero, savior, wrecking ball, threat, addiction, protagonist, and villain. So whether we see it as nothing more than an amped up Ask Jeeves or HAL 9000's understudy, it is undeniably here, and it's also why we're all here this evening. For many, AI simply refers to ChatGPT, which recently topped global download charts, and its ads you may have seen popping up all over the city. I saw this mysterious image on a bus shelter in the East Village. Women laughing together with ChatGPT. But the broader terrain of machine learning and large language models stretches across every industry, including very directly writing and research. There are countless positions we could take on the potential pitfalls, the potential and pitfalls of AI, including the existential and environmental crises it has sparked. But tonight, we attempt to focus in via our Decrit lens to explore AI through its contexts and consequences, and to hear from voices who are working as experts in the field. When our current cohort entered the Decrypt program, every single student had already used AI in their personal and professional lives, some very extensively. Meanwhile, strict institutional language prohibiting its use, written just the year before, already felt dated or even reactionary. So we are taking an experimental and active approach. This panel is the first public program emerging from the Google AMI Award we received for our project, The Design Lens, Critical Writings on Machine Learning. We owe an enormous thanks to Brian Droitcour, a longtime friend and now collaborator, for better or for worse, who brought this proposal to our department. In addition to moderating tonight, Brian developed a 5-part course examining AI as both a research tool and as an object of critical analysis. For us to analyze, for the students to analyze. Brian is a critic and the director of Outland, a nonprofit supporting publishing and education around art, culture, and technology. He has been at the forefront of contemporary criticism for many years, from identifying the #ArtSelfie to his Yelp reviews of New York art galleries, using new media platforms to expand our understanding of art and its shifting audiences. We're also joined by Cliff Kuang, whose book User Friendly, How the Hidden Rules of Design Are Changing the Way We Live, Work, and Play, which made the rounds when it first came out in our department. Student desk to student desk. You can see it has some Post-its. But that feels like forever ago user experience. We've moved on to AI. It was called A Tour de Force by the New York Times. He is a senior staff designer at Google working on AI innovation and holds patents in the company's top 1 percentile. And Maryam Monalisa Gharavi. Monalisa, a poet, artist, translator, and prompt engineer at Zapier, where she builds and scales AI workflows. She is the author of Bio, which we need to get. I don't have it to show off. From Inventory Press in 2018, and is the founder of Oil Research Group, org, a one-woman collective exploring oil, data, and extractive economies. We're so grateful to have all three here to help us make sense of the moment. Please join me in welcoming Brian Droitcour, who's moderating, Cliff Kuang, and Monalisa Gharavi.
Thanks for that wonderful introduction, Eric. As the slides Eric was showing at the beginning demonstrate, there is so much anxiety and hype around AI right now, and the workshop that I'll be leading in collaboration with Eric is really conceived in the spirit of thinking more soberly about what these tools actually do, how writers can make use of them. And I'm also really grateful to Google AMI and Eva Kudereka from Google, who's here, for supporting this program. I think, as much hype and anxiety there is, the reality is undeniable that large language models have changed the way that people obtain and process information. And so the workshop is really going to explore how writers can respond to this situation proactively, and what kind of ways they can use these tools in their practice to present their research in interactive ways. So we're going to be talking a little bit more about that reading and writing environment, but I'd like to start by just getting to know our panelists a bit better. I wanted to bring both of you here because you have backgrounds working as writers and in publishing, but you now work in the tech industry. So I'm curious to hear about how you made that transition and how your work as writers and critics informs your engineering or technological daily work. Do you want to start, Monalisa?
Sure, I can start. Repeat the first question.
I just want to hear more about how you made the transition from working as a writer to working as an engineer, and how you feel like your background informs your current work.
Great. It's great to be with you all. Hi. Trying to keep this user-friendly and brief. It's been quite a ride. I will say, before maybe talking about prompt engineering and as a field and maybe my place within it. Can you hear me okay? Maybe just to acknowledge that I think when people say AI, Eric is totally right. We're often talking about the chat interface, particularly ChatGPT. ChatGPT came out to consumer use in November of 2022. So if there's a historian in the room, you can tell me the origin of this quote, but it takes 3 years to stabilize a revolution. And this month is 3 years. And roughly the time I have been a prompt engineer, roughly, give or take some months. And maybe just to sort of lay that on the table, to go to prompt engineering, it's a really funny phrase in that there's a deterministic part of it, like engineering is deterministic, if A, then B, and prompting, or the creative side of crafting technical design and infrastructure for software, is necessarily creative and non-deterministic because language is ungovernable, which is how I ended up in a 2-person prompt engineering department of 2 female poets at a startup. And just to get a little bit more political, I think that being female is also relevant, in that the first software engineers 30 years ago were women, and software engineering was poorly understood. It was not really standardized. It was in its infant stage. It was poorly paid, and it was not glamorous and covetable. And that shifted around maybe early 2023 in terms of prompt engineering, but you sort of saw 2 things: either charlatan quacks on LinkedIn, that was prompt engineering, like they are the charlatan quacks, or why do they get paid money to do this, like anger, or seemingly impenetrable as a field. Those were sort of that was the landscape a little bit. More personally, I have a vertiginous background and come to sort of this from a hybrid career. One is an artist. I've been an exhibiting artist since 2011, and a writer in many ways that you and I have met each other in the public domain since earlier than that time, and then as a theorist and employed in academia, and made a conscious decision in 2021 to leave that field. And yeah, maybe that's sort of where I can pause. And then everything else happened.
Right, Cliff?
How I went from writing to having a career in technology. I was a journalist for a long time. Ended up in journalism by accident. That's a story for another time. One of the books that I'm writing. But I ended up covering design because as an undergraduate, I was actually I studied I wanted to be a sculptor. I wanted to be a sculptor, and I also ended up with a major in philosophy. So clearly I was trying to articulate there was some connection between like making visual artifacts, making tangible visual artifacts, and the sort of thinking that goes into why we're here and what we do and what we're about. But design, I'm old as fuck. And design as a profession, as an education, did not exist at that time. So I bounced around, I was itinerant, but I ended up somehow as a journalist. And this sounds ridiculous, but I ended up as a journalist because I thought that it would give me enough free time to make art on the side, which is like a very low probability career for success, or like formula for success, right? But then eventually, like I actually had some success as a journalist. I founded Fast Company's design site. I was an editor at Wired. I wrote for the New York Times for a while, and but eventually, like my beat became design because I was like covering. I wanted to get closer to visual culture, and it occurred to me like this is what I would have done if I had known better. If I hadn't been lured in by all those like Ivy League like liberal art, East Coast liberal arts schools telling me that like this is the way, I would have gone to like an art school instead, and that's what I would have done. But I didn't know about that. I didn't know that was a career path, right? So like eventually, like in my mid 30s, I was just like, well, fuck it. Like I'll just take a risk and try to like become a UX designer, right? Instead of ruining the fact that I missed the boat or that nobody told me that like this was a thing that you could do, I'll just try to make this career transition from being actually at the like probably as good as you're going to get it to be as a journalist, to becoming a UX designer and sort of like try to work my way back up. And so I did that. In fact, somebody in the audience was there to witness that. Like when I was making that transition, that was about 10 years ago. So 10 years ago, I had some people that took a chance on me, and I started working as a UX designer. More people took chances on me, and I continued being a UX designer. And now I work on, I have what I would call my dream job right now. I work now on new AI features for Google's and Android as well. So thinking about what is the way that we interact with AI, what is the mental model we have about AI, and what is the utility that it brings to us every day. And I have controversial opinions about that. TLDR, I think chat interfaces are terrible. But yeah, that's where I am now. I'm fighting that fight, and tons of work that I've been doing in the last 10 years is along the lines of like where I think AI should be, not where it is now.
So Cliff, I'm going to try to summarize the argument of user-friendly very briefly, but as I understand it, you say in that book that in an attempt to make apps and software very easy to use, tech companies sort of prescribe or over-determine the uses that of these tools. And I'm curious how you try to work against that tendency, if at all, in your
It's such a great
work as
question.
an engineer.
It's a great question. I mean, I think that question actually gets to the very heart of the issues that like we were flashing up here, which is the idea that like just because a computer can give it to you doesn't actually like, there's some world in which that doesn't actually help you, right? Like the friction, the difficulty of doing something is the point. The ease of getting the output is not enough, right? You know, I was making that context many years ago, and I've much different, like I was making that point in the book in the context of like, for example, you push the buy button in Amazon, right? It's so easy. You push the Uber button, right? You know, and it dehumanizes everything that it took to get that thing to you that eventually materializes in your life, right? None of those people along the way are real to you, right? There's just a button, right? The other day, like I ordered DoorDash to a hotel, and the guy was like literally 90 minutes late, and he had a flat tire, right? And I was so mad because I was so hungry, right? I was so hungry. I was so mad, but I went down, met him, and he was just like, sorry, man, I had a flat tire. And my anger dissolved in an instant because I saw him as a person, right? That button doesn't let you see that. That button that allows you to click to that for that person just to like drop it off at your door and for you to never even see that person or acknowledge that human being allows that person not to exist, right? So that was the point I was making then. But like, I think the point that is happening now is that like we have all these things that make all this like stuff of everyday living so easy that we're sort of missing that the point of human life is the difficulty in achieving the thing, not just making it easy, right? It's all the sort of things that you have to encounter and engage and think about on the way to doing the thing that you ultimately want to achieve.
Monalisa, I'm curious what your perspective on this is, because as a prompt engineer, you work on automating these workflows, making connections between different sort of software programs. So you also think a lot about the user and the user experience. So do you sort of see things similarly as Cliff in terms of how these tools kind of erase a lot of experience in making things easy?
Yeah, I want to talk about the F word, friction. So thanks for saying that. And I think this will be a good conversation because I feel remarkably similarly. My one-woman collective, one woman because I couldn't get anyone else to read the books with me. So it just became a one-woman collective. And yes, we use the collective we. So I do use the second pronoun plural. We study oil because of, I'm going to get to AI in a minute, but I think this question of friction and the removal of friction and discomfort in human relationality is superbly important. That I came to oil and the liquidity of that technology through data and things like Uber. So like to take the DoorDash example, you know, before he gets the flat tire, he's just getting he's getting the orders almost before he can have any agency in the return of those orders. And there is something very oily to that. There's something very liquid and frictionless to that. The other way, and to bring in sort of my obsession, which is the CVS auto checkout, there was a big sort of like blink and you miss it cultural or political economy touchstone where CVS did like mass layoffs and but instead of like reducing the workforce because machines were doing the work, the worker and the shopper began to care for the machine. And I, as a CVS shopper, I don't know why I'm putting quotes, but my persona, the user persona of a CVS shopper, inevitably the machine breaks down. There's a glitch, something happens, it runs out of paper, something goes, the red light goes on, and then the worker who is managing all of the machines and all of the customers, it is not reducing labor hours, it is only making them more dense and harried, runs to my aid, and we are now engaged in the capital C philosophical care, not like care, but in the care and attending of the machine. And I found that, you know, very uncomfortable at best and like distressing at best and sort of the nadir of civilization at worst. And then you can just kind of scale that into other forms of relationality and technology. I think, yeah, I was nervous about coming because I thought, oh no, I have to be like the voice of AI. And like, that's like the last thing that you want to be. But my analogizing of this is that and this isn't me, this is Clive Humby, the British mathematician who invented the customer loyalty card. He is like a marketing guru on LinkedIn if you want to look him up. He's like a British PhD in maths turned, like he invented the CVS loyalty card. It was actually Tesco, but so we all have it because of that, because of him, because he's a data miner and a data marketer. But he's the person credited with the idea that data is the new oil. And so when I started working in AI, I was like, well, what is AI? And so my analogizing is that AI is the nuclear. And so if I can like sort of materialize this for just a minute, I think it's sort of a nuclear power, right? We talk about it in these ways that are so apocalyptic, but if you go to like, let's say France, I've spent some time in France, nuclear power is everywhere. They don't want my country, Iran, to have it, but they certainly run the country of France on nuclear power, right? So it's these incredible augmented uses, the reduction of friction in ways that have benefited humanity, and then potentially, you know, or not even potentially really, the worst, nuclear bomb, 100,000 people killed in about a third of a second in Hiroshima, right? So those are the stakes. It's weird to go from apocalypse to prompt engineering. Prompt engineering, I think my job is ideal in many ways, to borrow from what Cliff said, in that what I prompt for in this current moment, next week I will be 90 days into my role at a new company. I'm no longer at a startup. I'm at a bootstrapped company that was actually first failed at Y Combinator and then became a Y Combinator company, had $1 million, a whopping $1 million investment, and then was bootstrapped. So they sell to enterprise and they don't take investor money. It's kind of ideal in that you want the automation to have reduced friction. You want the things that humans don't do in the background, the sort of, I think, very unglamorous and boring things, you do want them to be automated because you want them to work right. If you, my favorite is like, if I press a burrito emoji on Slack, could I send a burrito to someone? If that makes sense. Like, could I integrate it so that if I press a burrito, I DoorDash a burrito to Cliff, just to be super ridiculous about it. And that kind of thing, you actually do want a degree of reduction in friction, because it's essentially automation and machines integrated to seamlessly speak to each other. What I have a lot of ire and a dissensual relationship with is what we're still living through, which has sort of left this conversation, which is the algorithmic model, not just the AI model, but again, the data is the oil, like that algorithmic model. And then on top of that, to layer AI in ways that can often be slapdash or sloppy or uncared for, that can also create maybe a third monster. But I think that in many ways, and I know you didn't ask this, and I certainly don't want to be a spokesperson for it, but I think it's a very convenient absorber of maladies, where the maladies are also lying in other parts of our culture and society and algorithms.
Okay. Cliff brought up the interface of chat, and I kind of wanted to get back to that. I think that's a really interesting design question, and I think it has really changed the way people use the internet, because for so long we were used to using a search engine that would give us a list of results, and we would still have to do some work, even though it was an ordered list, and usually the first or second one was what we wanted. We would have to sort of look at this information and decide which is going to be the most useful. Now there's just sort of this blank slate. We type something in human language rather than trying to understand like what's a good keyword, and we just get like all of this quasi-human language coming back at us. So I'm wondering what your critique of this is, Cliff, and also Monalisa, how you understand that in terms of like this idea of frictionlessness. I mean, it seems like, yeah, pressing the burrito emoji in Slack to send an actual burrito is sort of, using a AI tool in a way that gets away from that chat interface, but is also maybe even more like, increasing or decreasing the amount of friction.
I mean, okay, so let me reframe that question. I mean, it's essentially like you type something in, you get one answer. Everything seems so neat and clean. It abstracts like this enormous economy of all those people trying to answer your question, or that could potentially answer your question. Is that like roughly what you're asking about? Mm-hmm. This is a very deep problem. And the problem that I would articulate right here is that, like, for example, like, so I have very deep experience with this, because like I used to work on search visioning for I worked on search visioning for like 4 years. Like, what is the future of search, right? And one of the things that you encounter when you start like thinking about voice assistants and things like that is that, like, when you think about an answer engine versus a search engine, there's only one answer, right? So the power of being that one answer basically creates enormous concentration of economic power, right? Versus the power of seeing 1,500,000 answers and letting people pick, like that spreads that power, and it creates choice and agency in the ecosystem, in the broader ecosystem, right? But when you reduce everything to one answer, you basically cut all the people that had some contribution to that answer out of the equation, right? So this is like the deepest, like one of the deepest questions about AI is like, what happens to the entire economy of like the entire ecosystem of all those people that also had an answer, maybe a slightly different one, right? Maybe a different one geared to different people, or like I'm using answer as a short term for like as a short phrase for like the websites that were trying to answer your question, right? That contain the answer to your question. And like the short answer is like, I don't think anybody's figured this out. Like this is a real deep problem about how does the information, like what powers the incentives to create human knowledge and to codify it? Deep problem. And we don't know the answer to that, right? I sit here actually as somebody who simultaneously is working on AI, but also somebody who's part of the class action lawsuit that's going to get paid out by Anthropic for the $1.5 billion that they got ruled against them for infringing my copyright, right? So really interesting position to be in, right? And I don't know the answer. Like, is the answer somehow that we reverse engineer the math to actually figure out all the people who by percentages contributed to the answer? Because that's what it is. It's like, that's what AI is. It's just a huge fucking blender for every word that anybody has ever written, and then just like throws it out and just like makes a smoothie out of it and offers you the smoothie, right? And like, I don't know how to like, how do you pay the person that contributed the blueberries and the kale and the yogurt and the, you know, like, and the sugar? Like, I don't know, right? Whether or not we can disentangle that math, that's a deep question that I have no idea about whether or not we can figure that out. But I don't know. I mean, if I was out, like if I had my druthers, I'd be like rioting in the streets about that. But there's actually other stuff to riot about in the streets right now. Yeah, it's a real hard problem. I don't know.
Well, the blockchain solves that, right? That's what they say.
I thought the blockchain for a while. I was like, actually, I was like, I got a little blockchain pilled for a little bit, but yeah, that was wrong.
It's so funny. I did meet someone in San Francisco a few years ago who was starting a company, and the idea was that he had sort of analyzed all these images on DeviantArt and Flickr and had created like a program that determined like what percentage of this artist's style was being used in this stable diffusion output. But I haven't really heard.
So that's like, this is the fundamental difference between like the AI world. Like fundamentally, I wrote about this in the New York Times, like literally 8 years ago. Last long form piece I wrote as a journalist. It was just about how humans and machines, they don't think the same way. Like humans think in terms of like reasoned outcomes, and machines is just like all stochastic. It's all probabilities. It's all percentiles. And like humans just do not think like that. Like that's not how humans think. So like fitting that round peg in the square hole, or however the saying goes, like real hard. Like I don't know.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of where to enter there. Maybe I would come at it a little bit differently than the smoothie. Only in that, yes, just to go off the last point, because I think this is a really rich conversation. AI thinks in patterns because it's given the compute, given the chip, given the the training data, and what is called the parameter of the training data. It learns from patterns. And so to Cliff's point, or the Anthropic lawsuit, that is a massive, massive amount of data. But as I just read in Karen Howe's book that was published this year on OpenAI as a company profile of 400 something pages, they ran out of the data. Like all of human knowledge that they could give it, they finished it in 2023. You can fact check me. It may have been fall of 23 or early 24. And that's there. And absolutely correctly, like we learn, like I am currently speaking the English language based on the rules of the English language. And if I were to break those rules, and in prompt engineering, I repeatedly break those rules on purpose. And I'd love to shout out my former mentor, the linguist Anne Banfield, who is the inventor of how to break these rules. Like, for example, if I were to say, where do you do an enclitic break on the word, excuse my French, abso-fucking-lutely, where you put the F word in that is not something that AI knows how to do. Okay. So like, if you know that, then maybe you could hack the pattern, which is where I come in with anthropomorphization or humanization, or what I call de-AIfying. Sorry to nerd out for a minute, but like that is how you think about it, is like, oh, if I'm trying to teach you to be more human, you're not going to learn how to be more human. But what I could do is potentially teach you some of the rules and rule breaking. Like, I don't know, there's one for Philadelphia that Dr. Banfield would do, like, fill a fucking Delphia. But if you were to ask AI to do it, which I have, it doesn't know how to do that. It does I can't even do it wrong. Like, that's how it embedded the deep structure. By the way, she used to be called the female Chomsky, which I think is super sexist because she was like in the same class as Noam Chomsky. But anyway, all that to say that, yes, I think one of the biggest differences in working within the industry versus outside of the industry is realizing that these are patterns. And if you are working with an LLM, you are working with a pattern recognizing machine that I call an AI agent, and that it is not a human rule-minded being or what is it, cognizant. The other thing I wanted to say about the smoothie, I feel like I want to get to the smoothie. Because I think that's a really interesting question, and a very like kind of a valuable one, of like, what is it? What is this output? Is it the regurgitation of hundreds and thousands of minds and human labor and effort and lifetimes to create this knowledge, is the people in this room have, that is now being given to the AI, and then it's giving a certain kind of output? Or is it also producing something in, I hate to say this, but I did a course on authorship in AI, but original. And the legal part of this, and it's being played out in the courts in ways that I wish I had more data on, is that it is considered original, which is why it's actually really hard to win which is why it's hard to sort of, the litigation on this is really hard. It's really easy if you're Stephen Schwartz, the lawyer that used ChatGPT in his federal New York case and was fined and admonished. And it's a very famous case, very funny, right? He actually blamed his teenage son for that, because the cases were completely hallucinated. But it's different where it's just writing the boundary of what the output is. And that boundary, that edge, is, I think, what is probably potentially going to get litigated, to say nothing of the illegal use of using authors to train the data. I feel like I'm going in some kind of labyrinthine maze here, but
I think AI is just autocomplete on steroids. Nothing more, nothing less. That's it. Like, by that argument, like, let's do a thought experiment. If you gave 1,000 people the same gun and they killed one person, who do you charge for that crime? If they all shot that bullet at the same time, who do you find guilty of the crime? Like, by that argument, like, basically, like, nobody's guilty. Somebody killed him. Like, somebody killed that guy.
So the autocomplete thing is interesting, because the early autocomplete is actually what is used to analogize to AI.
My point there is just like, do you charge all 1,000 people, or do you try to find the one person who actually caused the actual point of death? Like, just because, like, maybe this is a weird example. Let's just drop it. But like, yeah, just drop the example. I'll work it out later. But like, I just don't think that AI is making anything new. Like, I ask AI stuff and I'm just like, this is garbage. Like, this is trash. And like, yeah, like it replaces like mundane commodity writing that you don't want to do, right? But it doesn't make art. It absolutely does not make art. Like, I have never once thought that something that ChatGPT or Gemini or Claude, any one of those gave me, was actually a nice sentence. It was like a 51st percentile sentence, and nobody wants to be a 51st percentile person. Like, that's not who we are as a people. The average of something is not the good thing. Like, nobody wants the average, right? Like, human voice, human judgment, human perspective, human foibles and quirkiness and oddity. Like, that's what makes you a writer. Like, I look at this stuff and I'm just like, it helps me Don't get me wrong, it helps me enormously in many tasks. I do not attribute any kind of artistry or interestingness at all to it. The interestingness comes from your intent as a person, not from the AI's response as a machine.
I think the autocomplete is what I want to address, because I think that's autocomplete was seen as the early progenitor, except the data was so slim. So it would just be like, it would be a very, very kind of uncannily bad autocomplete and predictive output.
No, it was really good. That was why it was successful.
But then LLMs came around using what is now called deep learning, which I think is a deeply problematic and uninteresting use. Essentially, neural networks that we are, again, anthropomorphizing using the word neural, that are doing extremely long-range patterns. And it's the long-range patterns that are making it, I would argue, different than autocomplete, because the proof of that is that, and this is sort of my only pet peeve about this whole thing, is like never ever calling it a tool. I've had like the CEO of our startup would be like on investor calls going, it's a great tool. And I'd be like, please don't say that it's a tool, because it's not. It's an input and an output. That is a system and a process. But anyway, that was just the pet peeve I wanted to share. But depending on the input, and I want to go back to chat interfaces, because I think that's actually a really compelling dissensual thing, or dislike. I really agree. The thing with that, right, is that the user has such little agency over that output. And to your point earlier, if I ever use ChatGPT, and I don't very often, but if I do, never ever do I only allow it to give me one response. And that's the diversity of ideation that you are saying is foreclosed. And I couldn't agree more that, like, why would you, like, I ask you this, you give me this, right? I give you a lazy prompt and you give me this output that is some sort of like summarization. But if you were to use a developer tool, and I think everyone in here could use it because it's in natural language. I build software in natural language. You get a system prompt, you get a user prompt, you get assistant user dialogue. You can create what's called multi-shot prompting, which essentially just means providing examples. And the reason I'm saying all of this technical stuff is because you're absolutely right that, and there's a really brilliant paper, and I wish I could like remember the name of the authors to give them credit, but the point of the paper is, I think it's a Google DeepMind paper, that AI, the intelligence of the quote deep learning, i.e. LLM, as that's what I'm referring to when I say AI, has functional knowledge and what the authors called world reasoning. And what that is in like plain spoken English is functional knowledge, like teaching it the rules of Spanish or Japanese. But then that it does really well. It has a huge brain for that. There's a number for the brain that it has for that. What it doesn't do well, and the human that we're talking about, the art, because I think the idea that it could create art is deeply offensive to me. What it doesn't have is the tent of your context. It doesn't have what they call world reasoning. It can do functional reasoning, where if I teach it Philadelphia and abso-fucking-lutely, it can learn from my pattern, and it can do the correct enclitic break and mime for you that it is more humanized, which is kind of what you want sometimes, perhaps. But it is terrible. And they have not yet figured out on the machine learning layer, I work on a prompt layer, on the ML layer, they have not really figured out how to give it world reasoning. What would you need for to be artistically minded, or to create outputs that are absolutely going to be breathtakingly like, you need world reasoning, you need to have world knowledge and context. So I say all that to say that it's, yes, the interfaces, I want to like move us a little bit beyond the generalities of it, and just to say that what the powers that be, what at OpenAI, and I think even more so at Anthropic these days, what they seem to be wanting to do is to move or convince us that the world reasoning is extremely within reach. And I find that idea to be absolutely preposterous. It is not within, I don't think that it is within reach. I'd love to see evidence that it is within reach, but that is what they refer to as not the AI and the consumer and the ChatGPT, but as strongly what they desire, which is the artificial general intelligence, which, you know, we could debate or not debate.
So I think my interest as a writer and a critic is approaching these new technologies and the habits that they introduce and not just rejecting them as cultural critics so often do, but really trying to think about how there can be room for critical thinking for human quirks in them, and how we can carry these traditions over into new ways of reading, writing, and thinking. And so I'm really curious, like I think we've come across a couple of those ideas so far. I mean, one is thinking about how perhaps the interface could not give the singular answer, but show a diversity of possibilities. But I'm just kind of like curious to hear your thoughts about like where is there a potential for criticality, artistic thinking in these in these not tools, systems and processes. Yeah.
I think it's a tool. Stop, full stop. Let me just like, just to stop, like, I don't think in abstractions. Let me just tell you how I use it as a writer, making original things. So by day, I draw pictures. In the mornings, I write. And one of the things that I'm writing is like kind of like a cultural history of psychiatric medications. And it's a memoir. I have basically had a front row seat to every psychiatric revolution of the last 40 years. So that means SSRIs, psychedelics. Into which you may or may not classify ketamine, and now EMDR, which is like a new type of treatment. But anyway, like I use the AI to ask questions that are really hard that would have taken a research assistant a year to figure out. But now I can actually just ask questions and just like try ideas to see if there's any grounding in those ideas, to see if there's any proof out there that that idea is actually real. So what I've done with that is actually reconstruct a history of SSRIs, for example. I wrote a history of SSRIs that, as near as I can tell, has not been told, but it was hiding in all of these other documents that were not collated and collected, but I was asking the right questions. I was asking the questions. The AI didn't ask the questions. I asked the questions. This is what I mean when I say like the human intent made the art, made the original thing. The AI went and found it all, but it didn't answer those questions. It didn't create the narrative argument. It didn't create the arc, right? There's a caveat here that I do think that AI can find the justification for anything you want it to, because it will just like say like, there's one document on the internet, despite the 99,000 others that says this thing that you're arguing, right? That's the danger. But that's what fact checking for is. That's why you go back and you talk to real people, right? But it allows me to try ideas out at a time scale that is like so compressed. So something that would have taken me years to research took me a weekend, right? Like, and it was just because I knew how to ask the right questions. Now, the deeper question is, how did I know to ask the right questions? Just growing up hard, growing up weird, like, like growing up with friction. Yeah, like it's not unlike, it's not unlike the actually advent of computers, because like one of the things that actually made personal computing actually a thing was that, the first computer was ENIAC, right? Right? That's the first programmable computer. It was created to actually do the calculations to construct the hydrogen bomb. And you had to like drop off a punch card and you got the results the next day, right? But as soon as they added a little readout monitor to it and a keyboard where you could just walk up to the computer and enter the program yourself and just see what spat out, that meant you could actually improvise ideas. It became a creative tool, not just a calculator. It became a creative tool because of that active feedback. Now, what I'm describing of the advent of the first computer interfaces happened to me literally with, you know, Gemini. What I was using was Gemini Deep Research to try out all these research queries that would have taken probably like an entire fleet of PhDs, like, you know, like doing all this all day and reading all day to figure out if any of these hypotheses about what could be the connective threads between this idea by that scientist and that idea by that scientist, that idea by that scientist. You couldn't put that together. Like that replaced all that human labor. I think the deeper question is, how do you create like people that are interested in asking those questions, as opposed to people just wanting to shortcut all the friction that made me curious enough to want to ask those questions, right? Because we cannot end up as a species of people like in Wall-E that are just like sitting in this like, if you guys remember Wall-E, it haunts me. And basically people there like, and it's so prescient, it's such a prescient movie, right? It's like people are just reduced to like these blobs that just roll around in these like hover chairs with screens strapped to their faces, with soda on demand, that just don't do anything but press buttons and consume. They don't make anything. They just consume, right? And that's the thing that I think is really threatening about technologies. It just makes you into a consumer, not a maker, right? And so that's actually, I think the positive case is like actually AI can make all of us into makers, but we have to actually have some identity and some reason to make something.
Isn't that movie about Wall-E acquiring world reasoning?
Oh, I have no idea. I don't remember the world reasoning stuff, but like but that's like that. Wall-E wasn't making a point about. Wall-E wasn't making a point about technology. Wall-E was making a point about people.
Yeah.
Like,
Do you remember my question, Monalisa? Do you?
I think I can. Wally digs the question. Okay. As an augmented brain, I used an LLM to teach me Python, and it was really hard to learn Python, and I felt like I was really sucking at it, and it didn't tell me like, you're absolutely right, you're doing a great job. It was just like straightforward, just correcting me, and it was like my long distance tutor, and that was probably the most I don't know, maybe boring, but very memorable.
that's a great example, though. Like,
Use
that's a great
of it.
example.
And maybe that's sort of the, like, imagine, like, I lived in New York City not that long ago and taught myself Python using AI, but imagine if you're at a place with very few educators, with educators who don't have long range access to the subject that you need tutoring in, right? Education is more and more, we're in an institution here that is incredibly privileged, even though it shouldn't be. It should be a civil right. And so on that basis, that was really cool. I will say my very first prompt ever was to create a video. So it wasn't ChatGPT, but it was on a forum. I exhibited it for the first time this summer in a show. It's called Infinite Expanse, and it's a 20-second video. And the prompt was to create something that I myself could not film. I filmed everything that I've ever exhibited. Maybe I had a cinematographer one time, but I filmed it myself. But this was an oil pipeline in an astral plane was sort of how the prompt began. And it was envisioning an oil to crib on Wall-E, an oil pipeline that is being built along the known galaxy. And the AI, you know, I described it in somewhat lush terms. What I was doing, this was like, I don't know, some point in 2022 maybe, and thus it was created. But I don't use it to write. Many years ago on The New Inquiry, I don't know if any of our readers are in the room, but it was sort of a everything canvas in a way. It had a point of view but I was given incredible editorial space to bring my point of view, but to write in any way that I wished, whether it was an interview with an anonymous artist, like a graffiti artist in Paris, or whether it was a critique of the way that Nicholas Kristof hugs people in the pages of the New York Times. That was a real essay. He responded to that essay. Or whether it was fiction. And the fiction that I was writing is me writing in a holographic method, meaning, let's say you look at Virginia Woolf's letters and she has 13 versions of her letters, and the hologram is like one layer of that she has excised, for example. So using that method, imagining something in the archives of a writer, a known or a person, on and about the subject of America. I'm very obsessed with the fiction of the United States and the fictions that it tells itself about itself. And then me writing as them. So for example, Frida Kahlo follows her then husband to Detroit while he works for the Ford factory, and she has a miscarriage and she has pages of her diary. And so I'm at, like, this is pre-LLM. I knew nothing about AI, but like I learned how to write as Frida Kahlo, and I would produce a page that did not exist. And so in prompt engineering, I was asked to do this and have the AI do it. And so that's a weird thing. Like if I were to write, like knowing what you know about the voice of Brian Droitcour, write a series of LinkedIn posts and tweets from the point of view of Brian Droitcour that he can then
I would
edit
never write a LinkedIn post. Come on.
and do it in such a way that it's
You
almost
say that, but there's gonna
seamless.
come a day, Brian. You're gonna find yourself on LinkedIn writing a thing. You're gonna hate yourself.
So all that to say that that operation, that holographic operation that the AI can do insanely well if given a good prompt, that's what I was sort of doing that before that, if that makes sense. And so my deep interest, my deep disinterest is using AI to write. But I also just want to say, given that there's, at least Brian and Eric have told me this, that there's journalists here, I want to talk about hallucination for a second. You know, journalism is a critical function of a working society, and journalists serve a vital function. It's on par with the legal, medical, other profession, right? It's a good. And also,
You're here.
in those professions, there's a very high degree of error. The medical journals and medical, not to mention the practice of medicine and malpractice, but just to go on the cogitons, the thinking, there's an incredible amount of error in journalism, in the legal profession, in the medical profession, right? And so my work and my first breakthrough as a prompt engineer was a hallucination filter. We call them actions, but can you build something that can allow really like sifting through and making sure the AI can revise its own steps? In the field, it's called the open domain and the closed domain. So for example, if I were to say the closed domain is all of the sorry, I'm going to pick on you. All of the works of Brian Droitcour are in these PDFs. That is a closed domain. Use that. Whatever your output is, judge it against Brian Droitcour's output in the closed domain. And then there's the other corroboration of the external domain of all of the search of the world and all of the knowledge of the world. So this is a very complex operation that is hard for humans to get right. And we know that AI hallucinates. It's not a bug, it's a feature. It's because it does long range pattern, right? Pattern, quote unquote, thinking. And so that was a very, like, I know that's not necessarily quote unquote a use, but I dog food in the industry. It's called dog fooding. I prefer to call it champagning when you use your own product before the user or after. But that is something I continue to use, whether it's like the AI produced something and I put my hallucination filter on it, or I put it just to catch my own errors when I'm maybe writing something in prose or when I'm whatever. So yes, using the system or the augmented brain to sift through corroboration in closed and open domains of writing so that we can potentially rely on a more truthful reality.
Okay, thanks. I mean, it sounds like you're both really interested in using this as a research process / tool. I think we should wrap it up. I'm wondering if we have any questions from the audience. Yeah.
Hand shot right up.
Yeah.
Thank you. It's not easy being first.
Oh, good. The Q&A started. I was getting it. Oh, yeah. Well, if you just say that, Brian can just repeat the question.
Okay, yeah.
That's Brian will repeat. Or I can have.
System, but that is non-deterministic. And even if you were to do something that we do in enterprise called changing temperature, temperature simply means the variability, the lowering randomness rate. Even if you were to put it on 0, you will not get the same answer, which is why there exists a job title called prompt engineer, because you're trying to get to the asymptotic limit of determinism. So what you said, I echo that. It sounds insane that the invented pop star, AI pop star is tagging the other AI pop star. But underneath your question, I think it's like, can you plagiarize a prompt? Sure. The prompt is the asset. The startup that I worked for was sold last month, and I could not believe what it was sold for. I thought that was a lot of money that it would be sold for. And it was essentially some contracts and prompts. That's what was sold, right? So yes, there is it's an asset, it's IP, it's proprietary information. But even if I were to release my prompts into the wild and break my, NDAs or whatever, the results would not be deterministic. The technology is non-deterministic.
I'm going to go controversial and say that anything that is created from AI using a prompt, i.e. using the AI as it was intended to be used, is not art. What I mean by that is that art has always been about exploring the boundaries and the edges and the misappropriations of the thing as it was intended to be used, right? Like that's basically the entire dialogue we've been having with art ever since Picasso, right? Ever since modernism. Basically, like what is outside of the frame that this tool had considered? What is the outside of the conceptual frame that we have been given and been asked of us, right? When you type in a prompt into an AI, you're using that exactly as all those engineers predicted you would use it, right? That's not art. That's just using it like they want you to use it, right? And if you want to talk about art with AI, you're going to have to look at people like John Rathman, old school internet artist, right? John Rathman's out there, he's breaking AI. I don't know what he's doing with it. It's weird, right? But the point is like nobody can recreate that. He's breaking it in some way that's all his own, right? Using tools as they were intended to be used is not art, right?
Well, I think this is sort of the issue here, because a lot of people who, think of themselves as AI artists, they have to do a lot of work to use something like Stable Diffusion in a way that is going to make images that look distinctive, that don't look like a very standard Stable Diffusion output. And so once they come up with that prompt, then if someone else uses it, after they've kind of like broken it or tweaked it in a way that really is producing something that doesn't look like other AI art, then that is when they get angry that other people are doing it.
Yeah, I mean, I can
But
see that. Yeah, sure,
I also think that the interesting AI art is stuff that is thinking about like the social coordination and the sort of like way people interact with it, and usually involves something beyond like an image. But
yeah, and I think it's like it's like making it smaller and making it weirder, or just like breaking it in some way, or like making it yours in some way. Like if somebody can readily replicate your thing by just copying your prompt, I just feel like you haven't done enough to be art, right? Like there's an Instagram account that I follow called Void Stomper that I really like. They make horrifying AI slop art. I have no idea how they made it, but like, and none of my friends do either. It's like the weirdest, most horrific like AI slop art you can imagine. But like, it's exposing something about the AI in a way that like is very unique to that person. And like the notion of copying that, you wouldn't even occur to you, right? Like that's that own person's voice somehow. Yeah, like that's when you start getting to the art, like making art. Like there's a difference between craft and there's a difference between craft and art. I don't know what's in between, but I know the poles.
question over there. No, I'll just repeat.
You can repeat, yeah.
I'm interested in something Cliff said about research and the nonfiction writing from AI, using AI in the kind of most conservative manner, but really bring down that research time. So the thing that would have taken a research assistant 6 months to do now perform over the course of a weekend. What's the implication for nonfiction writing, for the ability of nonfiction books to come out? I think that we probably remove fiction from this because there's so much author biography stuff that goes into fiction. But I feel like this is really going to change the metabolism at which fiction is produced and the business of selling, at which nonfiction is produced.
It has for me. I'm working on 2 books right now.
Can I just repeat the question for the live stream?
Sorry.
So yeah, the question is, it sounds like AI is going to accelerate the production of nonfiction books because it speeds up the research process so much. So what are the implications of that?
So like I'll just give you an example. I'm writing like my first book. Like I had to interview 200 people. It took me 6 years. I now have 80% of a first draft on one book and like maybe 30% of another. I had those in 3 months. And both of those I'm using heavily like AI to research. Like for example, in one of the books, which is about feedback loops, I'm doing very intensive research about, I did very intensive research. It feels actually a joke to call it intensive now, about cybernetics, right? Really sleepy. Nobody remembers the history of cybernetics. Like you might, if you've heard it, you only heard it by watching Terminator 2, which I don't even know that like is even like, it's probably on like Turner Classic Movies now for this audience. But like, cybernetics, and like it allowed me to like figure out what were the holes in the broader cybernetics argument and what they were doing and what they were thinking and how they were thinking about technology. What were the missing gaps? Like why did they fail? Why did they flame out? Why did they like that would have taken me like 3 PhDs to do, right? I mean, like I just think it's going to speed up human creativity because it sped up mine, right? But again, like that's presuming that you went up through the craft, the hard work of like struggling to write something yourself, right? Like, I don't think you can separate my ability to make an original work from all the pain that it took to get to that point, right? The suffering was the point.
Maybe. Okay, I think we should wrap it up. And if you have more questions, you can join us at the reception upstairs. But let's give a round for Cliff and Monalisa. Thanks so much for this stimulating conversation. And thanks to Decrit.
Yes, thank you, Brian. Please join us right upstairs for some light snacking and some drinks. Heavy drinking. Thank you so much.